All right, let's move to the Jack Adams Trophy. On this show last year, we talked a lot about Daryl Sutter at 50-1. He ended up cashing. This is my favorite market to play in the preseason, for NHL, because bookmakers just don't really pay attention, right? Like we know that with the NHL, it's not going to be. This isn't the NFL. This isn't college football. This isn't the NBA. So you can find some big numbers that correlate to much smaller odds in other markets. For example, the Sutter bet was you getting 50-1 on whether or not you thought the Flames were going to be go over their point total or win their division or whatever, which would been, probably like 8-1, 12-1 last year. So you're getting 5 times the odds, and they end up cashing. For this market, I think the narrative this year is going to be, well, there's going to be two. The favorite is John Cooper. He's 10-1. He's never won it. So I think if the Lightning come back and like have another great regular season, it's going to be hard to beat him, because that point was drilled home when the ballot was released, or the nominees were released, and he wasn't on it. I don't like the number at 10-1. I won't be betting it, but I do like two guys in his division. Derek Lalonde, his former assistant, he's now coaching the Red Wings, and DJ Smith, he's 50-1 coaching the Senators. The reason I like both these guys is these are two teams that have been out of the playoff picture, near the bottom of the division for half a decade now. There's a lot of good feelings around the teams. They're the media seems to love the Senators hype. The media loves the Red Wings becoming relevant again. The Red Wings are plus 290 to make the playoffs. The Senators are plus 200. I think those numbers are probably a little short for both of them. But if they make the playoffs, either one of these guys, they're going to be one of the 3 nominees. So DJ Smith of the Senators at 50-1, Lalonde 50-1. That's where I'm looking. Those are two of my favorite bets, preseason bets, on the entire betting board going into the season. Nick, what do you have for Jack Adams?
So I would still, your 2 are my top 2 for sure. I see it the same way, and those 51 prices are just so strong. All we need to see is one of those teams turn it around heavily, which is really realistic with where their rosters are getting to. So I think those are the top 2. And then kind of a less of a long shot for the team to be good, I think, is Vegas and Bruce Cassidy. He can be had at 18-1 to take this, or to take the Jack Adams. And I think it's really likely we see Vegas with a big turnaround this year. Everyone knows it got pretty ugly last season, but he's still inheriting a pretty good situation. And on top of that, like, I just think he's a really good coach. We've seen it with Boston. That team's always really structured. They're played great as a team. So I think there's a pretty good chance he takes over Vegas with way less injuries. Are going to be a far stronger roster this year. And I think that just could fuel a narrative of a bounce back that we want. But yeah, I would put that in third behind year 2, because that 50-1 price on those guys is just so strong.
Yeah, the 2 other guys I think I have a little bit of interest in, and these are shorter numbers, so I don't know if I'll get there. Jim Montgomery, who's replacing Cassidy in Boston. He had that Dallas Stars team playing really well before he ended up in rehab for addiction issues. And Lane Lambert at 20-1. I think if the Islanders make the playoffs, there's a strong chance he's at least considered, coming off the season they had last year and the fact that he's a rookie coach. Those 2 are not even close to the amount I like Smith and Lalonde, but if you are looking for something in that 20-1 range, those would be the 2 I like. I do like the Cassidy shout as well. Pete, what do you have for Jack Adams?
So I am with you both on the Ottawa Senators and the Detroit Red Wings, because I think that one of those 2 teams is going to make the jump and make the playoffs. I'm not quite sure which one, but I think there's a really good case for each of them together to maybe surprise a team like Boston with all their injuries, or maybe surprise even a team like Toronto, which is a little more bold, but their goaltending tandem gives them a little bit lower of a floor. So again, I think they're within striking distance. They've closed the gap. They're going to be really exciting and good offenses. I'm interested in Rick Bowness, what he's going to do with the Winnipeg Jets, because I think one year or another, right, all of us and all our guests on our Fantasy on Ice podcast have been high on the Jets at one year or another for good reason. Last year, they dealt with a lot of injuries. Some of the usage wasn't what it should have been. They played with 2 different coaches. Maurice resigned, the whole thing. I think Bowness is a really good coach. He turned Dallas around. He maximized their young players with Jason Robertson and Rupe Hintz the past couple of years. interested what he could do with the Cole Perfetti. If Cole Perfetti, that's a guy we didn't mention for the Calder, but if he could get a 25-30 goal season from Cole Perfetti, if he's playing with either Dubois or Mark Scheifele, like that's some nice sneaky upside there as well. So I wanted to mention that. But again, the Jets were kind of like a wreck last year, right? Because Scheifele at the end of the year, like, was talking about, not being content with the losing. And now this year they've already stripped the captaincy from Blake Wheeler. But if Rick Bowness gets that ship on track, it could be really fun to watch. They could be a playoff team and very dangerous. I was looking in training camp, guys, and their top line was Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Nikolai Ehlers. That has to be one of my favorite line trios that I've seen so far in training camp.
Bonus is great. I think he's not the right coach for like 28 teams in the league, but the Jets are one of the 4 teams I think he's the right coach for. He's 35-1. And I think, once again, you're looking at a situation where the Jets make the playoffs, which is, you're going to get, north of, or around 2-1 odds on, he's going to be considered. So that's really the point with the Jack Adams is this award is very highly correlated with like the surprise team that makes the playoffs, or if like a team just runs away. So it almost behooves you to just make sure you double check. Like, if you think the Red Wings are going to make the playoffs and you want to bet that number, just bet Lalonde. If you think the Jets are going to make the playoffs, you might as well just, split your stake maybe and bet part of it on them to make the playoffs and part on bonus. And that's just something always keep in mind with these Coach of the Year odds in the NHL. And we'll be kind of talking about these throughout the season on Line Change. Nick and I, because Nick can tell you about how he kind of caught the book sleeping on Sutter last season.
Yeah, totally. So at various times last season, the updating of those odds was just really far behind what we were seeing. So it was a couple weeks into the year and they still had 51-1. I can't remember the exact date. It's on my Twitter, but way past when it should have been updated to a lower number. And then there was a point in February where they still had Sutter hanging around at a near 20-1 number, or maybe 15-1. And by then it was really obvious that he was going to be at least nominated. So yeah, that'll definitely be one we'll be watching, hoping the books aren't updating as often as maybe they should.
And another example of that was when the Canucks fired Travis Green and hired Bruce Boudreau. He was hanging at like 66-1 or the close to 80-1 for a long time, and it was clear he got that team back on track. He didn't end up getting nominated, but had they made the playoffs, he would. And Pete, you think Boudreau might be worth a sprinkle again this year?
I do. I think that if there was more runway last year, they might have snuck into the playoffs on the back of Thatcher Demko largely, and the defense is still a little shaky there, but the forward group is loaded. They added Andrei Kuzmenko from the KHL. Pod Colson is a guy that I think in the next year or two is going to pop off. They re-signed JT Miller. They still have one of the best 24 and under cores in the league with guys like Pedersen and Quinn Hughes, and Brock Besser re-signed, and just really good young group of players that I think started to hit their stride again and started to look more like the team that they did in the playoffs. What was it, like 3 years ago, right? So give them a full season under Bruce. Boudreau has won the Coach of the Year trophy before, which is significant. I think Tortorella won it twice when he won it a few years back. And that's not a bad storyline to think about too. If it's a familiar face, people are voting on these awards, right? And it's a guy that I think a lot of people are fond of around the league for what he's done with multiple different teams over the years.